we need to talk about the types of volatile information that we're going to capture. And we're going to dig down into each of these: the RAM, the usernames and passwords, the DLLs, the contents of open windows. We're going to look at each one and say, okay, how do we collect this and what is the implication of it? So first is the list of running processes on the machine. This is what programs are running in RAM right now. Now, what will not be revealed from visual inspection of a process such as a rootkit is hidden Trojans that are used to exfiltrate data. Exfiltrate means to pull from the source and take it away, or allow remote access, or the keylogger siphoning. You're not going to see any of that stuff by visual inspection. You're actually going to have to dig down into the processes and see that keylogger running, or a suspiciously named particular process. You'll have to investigate each one of those processes. This list of running processes and digging down into this is much more for the reverse engineering or for the malware attacks that are occurring, and less likely for a court of law. For usernames and passwords, we need to think about all those different user inputs that are sprinkled throughout each one of those machines, or all over those different data sources. When we talk about the browser, remember the browser can store some of your activity. Particular applications can have their own encryption, like Word and PowerPoint have their own password encryption. We can even have encryption programs on the local machine. And all those different user accounts that we use, well, we want to collect up all that data, because more than likely the person's only going to have 2 or 3 different passwords out there, and they're just going to vary them by a little tiny bit. We're going to use that information that we gather here within this system to then reach out to those other resources that they have, like email, social networking accounts on their wireless access point. That'll give us a lot more data. So if we can collect them from inside the system, we can use them externally, and also vice versa. We can grab all that stuff from the outside world and then use it against the internal system that we have there. One of the tools that I use in social networking is something called Maltego. Maltego will allow you to capture all that information about people, not necessarily their username and passwords, but let me ask you a question. What's your favorite color? And I bet, if you said blue for argument's sake, I'll bet if I look on your Facebook page, you probably have a lot of pictures where you are in blue or this particular color. So that's probably going to be a part of one of your passwords, unless you're really sophisticated in your passwords. Now, if it's not you because you're a security professional, let's talk about the end user that's doing this. We can capture and gather up that information. I can guarantee you that there are plenty of sports fans out there that use their favorite team or their favorite player and their player's number to actually create passwords for themselves, and that we can definitely use that against them. Remember, this is all dynamic information that we're talking about, and right now let's talk about the loaded dynamic link libraries. You should be able to list all those DLLs and with associated running processes, and this will be able to tell you about malicious DLLs. In other words, Windows should be having these DLLs in process, and Word should be the parent process, and these are all sub-processes below it. Or Windows is the parent process, and these are all the sub-processes below it. Why does one of those processes have a sub-process of its own? Because maybe it's a malware insertion and it's injected itself into the process. So we need to look for those parent processes. And this happened a lot with what's called the Zeus botnet that was out there, where the actual DLL injection occurred quite often because of unpatched systems in a particular area. Contents of an open window. If you've got keystrokes, webmail, email clients, any of those values that are in those form fields, that actually can be exposed in a lot of cases from search fields and also from previously typed information. Those are all great. If you see a user that's logged on to a particular system, they're in their webmail, the autocomplete feature may have their username or their password stored there. Usually not the password so much these days, but it is possible. This list could be extensive, so we want to capture this information as quickly as possible. Remember, live systems, it's going to be tough to get all this information. We'll probably dump it from RAM. Open registry keys of a process. Imagine how crucial it would be to identify registry keys associated with a malicious process. We could go in, and we've done this in the Windows section where we actually do live acquisition, and we say, okay, we'll install this executable and we'll let it run and see what kind of DLLs it picks up, see what kind of registry keys it resets, and capture that information off the system. Now, that's kind of tough to do in a live acquisition. You want to do it more in your what we call our sandbox, a little bit easier to deal with. But you can still do it on a live system. Open files for a process. You should be able to list the open files associated with any process that would reveal any open files used or identified as being used by the malicious system out there. Again, here we're looking more on the malware side of things, less on the evidence side for conviction of somebody. We're trying to figure out how this thing has invaded. It's going to help identify the resident file that is logging the keystrokes or the usernames and passwords that it's capturing at that point. So you'll see that that particular open file or process is actually collecting this up if it's a software key logger. Remember, hardware key loggers, they have no footprint on the operating system whatsoever because they're between the keyboard and the computer itself. This can help identify some configuration files also that are used in open processes, configuration files that are helping the malware or assisting it. Maybe those configuration files may contain an encryption key or a decryption key to allow that process to run, and they reference it quite often to de-encrypt portions of the code as it's being placed in memory. Unpacked or decrypted. One of the most valuable contributions that memory forensics can give us is the analysis and the ability to carve out on the fly malicious process out of memory, because when that malicious process isn't running, it's encrypted. So as we have it running and we do a RAM dump, we can see the actual code in that particular RAM, and that reveals something about its source and our way for us to fight it. Memory resident malware. Now, a lot of times, well, I'd say about 8 years ago, what would happen when you went in and did a malware investigation, you could take the files that are located on the machine and inspect them as an image file. You wouldn't have to actually look at the executables live because something would be stored there. If you look at the Metasploit tool, you'll realize that most of the new exploits that are being created are memory resident only. Here's why. If we can attack this machine and it's compromised because it doesn't have the particular patch or security fix on it, and we can attack it now, we'll load all of our stuff into memory, and we'll do whatever we need to do because the machine is on or left on for long periods of time. If the end user reboots the machine, they're only rebooting the machine. They're not bringing it down, patching it. So when they reboot the machine, our code is gone. We now know that we've lost that connection. And then as the machine comes back up again, we send that code in again and reinfect that machine in RAM so we can keep on getting it to do our bidding. So memory resident malware is a fact of life at this point, and that's proven by what's going on with the Metasploit tools. Now, there's all sorts of types of volatile information out here, and I got most of what I have here and the elegant way it was said by Mark Wade, the Vice President of EdgePoint Forensics. So I encourage you to go back to the dfinews.com site and collect more from Mark. He's a brilliant man. He's done a really good job there. Also, this is a great place to learn about what's going on in forensics. That's most of our volatile collection on data acquisition that we're going to talk about. Next, we're going to go flip into our non-volatile acquisition.